to EnterTheRealWorld.com. This is the Tape Crusaders. It's a Batman podcast that we just left in the dirt several years ago. My name is Matt Waters. I'm joined for this, as always, by Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you? Are you excited to return to the deep, dark mythos of Batman?
I mean, I'm excited to return to my own website, as I've been abandoned repeatedly.
You have not been abandoned. Just...
Everyone, please use this moment to listen to the Legion Season 3 podcast. That's definitely on the website somewhere.
Look, I decided I need to rewatch every single episode, and that took longer than I thought. It will be coming soon. Speaking of comic book properties that use the song White Room, Joker? There's a segue. Todd Phillips' own Joker. We don't know what each other think of it, but actually, I think I do know what you think of it. So I'm just going to tentatively say, welcome to Dark Phoenix Part 2, because I think we violently disagree. What's your big, broad takeaway?
I think it's a film that's essentially entirely about Joaquin Phoenix acting. Many films have taken this path to success because it's just kind of enjoying Joaquin Phoenix diving into a character full tilt, and I think that one makes it for fairly compelling. I mean, I think on the broad strokes so quickly, I'd rather Todd Phillips try to make a Martin Scorsese movie than Todd Phillips make a Todd Phillips movie. I don't think this is some genius film or anything, but it's infinitely better than almost anything he's ever done before. And again, that's a low bar to get over, but just in terms of immediate reactions. It's interesting. I was thinking a lot about kind of this really, Nolan with Dark Knight Rises really tried to do, he talked about how Tale of Two Cities was a huge influence. And one, there should have been some more questioning about whether or not that was a good thing influence. Because essentially the takeaway of Tale of Two Cities is, hey, rich people, don't be such dicks.
Fuck
otherwise, bad things are gonna happen. But not don't change anything. Just be less dick. Keep your money. Just don't be a complete dick.
Just 14% less.
Yeah, and that's just kind of stupid. That's just
that's not satisfying your eat the rich narrative.
And I think this one attempted to do a lot of interesting things with a story that was probably far more on the side of the people. But also, it is still Todd Phillips, so it's incredibly clumsy in doing that. From what I gathered, a lot of people took away the opposite messages from this, or feared people would take away the opposite messages. I mean, in general, I think that's kind of stupid to fear what the stupid people will think about movies. We might as well not make any movies if we're worried about what stupid people are going to think of them. But I do think that Todd Phillips is an incredibly clumsy filmmaker. And I don't think it's outrageous that some people looked at this and thought, man, are we sure this is what are we sure he's doing what? Huh? Who sides everyone on in this? But largely speaking, I think it just works because it's a compelling acting performance from Joaquin Phoenix, and 99% of the movie is Joaquin Phoenix acting. Your side, go.
Okay, you don't feel as passionately about this as I feared, so we're not going to be in for a full-on shouting match. I agree, Joaquin Phoenix is quite good at being Joaquin Phoenix. This is a really interesting counterpiece to You Were Never Really Here, one of last year's best films. Yeah, I have been told repeatedly to watch that.
I mean, if you wanted to know what Joaquin Phoenix version of a dirt poor Batman would be, that's essentially what it would be.
Sure. I've also heard
a really fat alcoholic Spider-Man with no spider powers and no mask.
Sure.
That would be
I've also been told the reason that movie's good and this one is less so is because that one's by a woman and has something to say, whereas this one is not really saying much of anything. I somewhat agree with that. I don't know. I mean, I do know how certain people have come away from this being wow, what a deep criticism of society and what a masterpiece on the rich poor divide, because I don't actually think it leaned that heavily. It feels very broad strokes to me. It's man, it's messed up out there, right? And it's but
it feels like it wants to utilize that without actually doing any of the hard work of saying something about it.
Right.
And even especially, I think they really muddy it up in the end with the De Niro stuff at the end in terms of do you actually understand, were all those things an accident in the first 2/3 of the movie where you were pointing out how fucking hopelessly stupid rich people are and how much society is completely breaking down because of how stupid they fucking are and they're in charge? Yeah. Or was that just kind of shortcuts to tell, shortcuts for attention or something?
Yeah, and I think Phillips even has said in interviews, he doesn't see this as a political movie. And then, like, towards the end, when Arthur says, when he's dressed in the full Joker get-up at the end, he says, oh, this isn't a political statement. I was like, this is very art imitating life, because how can this not be a political movie when the backdrop and the thing you're blaming Arthur's entire journey on is a giant political divide between the rich and the poor, and social programs being underfunded, and also, like, to put the clown stuff in there when there was a very real clown movement in real life, and I don't know, to have that organized thing of like, oh, they dress like this and they're rioting on the streets, like, this is like, how is it not political?
I'll say this, generally speaking, I try to do this anyway, but particularly with this one, I don't care what Todd Phillips thinks of his own movie, and
sure.
Especially someone as like as dumb as him. Like,
yeah,
I really don't care.
Like
I still had to hear about it because of headline. Like, it was actually kind of a lesson in how hard it is to disengage from things you don't want to hear, like unimportant things, like Todd Phillips' opinion on anything. Like, I don't need to know or want to know Todd Phillips' opinion on anything. I don't seek it out, and yet I can't help but hear about it. And I'm just like, this is actually almost like a sad state of affairs. At one point in the world, I could not have to hear anything about what Todd Phillips thought about anything.
I don't think I heard his voice for a lot. Oh, he's in one of his movies, so I guess I did. But yeah, I didn't hear him as him, like, say anything. And now I've heard it a bit too much. And, you know, as much as I enjoy, like, his co-star, his actor, basically explaining why he's an idiot for condemning PC woke culture and all that. It's like, yeah, like, clearly this man is not a high thinker. It also troubled me a bit. Like, did you see Joaquin Phoenix got asked about, are you worried about this inciting real violence? And he just was not equipped to answer that question at all and just walked away, and like, that was a little bit worrisome that no one thought. I know what you're saying about we can't be afraid to make things that will, like, radicalize certain people, but I would think they would at least have something prepared for that kind of...
I mean, okay, but like, I think one, and this is kind of maybe transitions nicely into the content, I think probably one of the best things about this movie is that they make the Joker a fucking loser. He is... And I'm not just talking about, like, his life. Like, I'm not talking about, like, his mental health deficiencies. I'm not talking about the fact that he was his mom. He himself, as a human being, is a fucking loser. There is nothing in this movie that could... Like, if your takeaway from this movie is, man, I want to be the fucking Joker. Anyone wants to dress up like this dude for Halloween? Also, a fucking loser. Like, this is not...
And they will. Both versions.
But like, they are... Like, what I'm saying is that, like, this is probably the first conscious attempt to show the Joker for what the Joker would actually be, which is a fucking loser. And I think that was actually kind of a really important thing, and probably something I appreciated the most about the film. But like, I don't... Like, this isn't like... And again, that's the whole point, is that, like, I don't think Christopher Nolan should be blamed for anyone seeing that essentially making a hyper cool version of the Joker, like this unbelievable brain that can somehow contort all these things happening simultaneously and predict how everyone will react to a million different things, as cool, like, of a super soldier could possibly be. And it wouldn't be his fault if someone dressed up like the Joker and shot anybody either. So I don't really see the value in...
Like, with Nolan's Joker, like, I think a very certain sect of people latched on to, you know, Joker philosophizing about, oh, the world is shit, everything's shit, let's all hurt each other and do chaotic random bullshit. And they ignored the part where the film pretty much comes down on the side of, he's wrong, and look, the people didn't do what he thought they would, and Batman beats him, and, like, I know, like, a core tenet of Dark Knight Rises is, like, oh, he won in the end because he tore down Harvey, and, like, that illusion couldn't be... But whatever, like, broader strokes, it's like they do come down on the side of he's a villain and he's wrong, and, like, the theme of Dark Knight Rises, for as flawed as it is, and you can listen to us talk about it on this very series, they do go with that message of hope and, like, the common people rising up and all that, whereas I feel this movie is yes, he is a fucking loser, but they are also, I think, trying to make him... I think they want you to sympathise with him and, like, get behind him, and, like, the movie ending with him being sort of, like, raised up almost Daenerys Targaryen style and, like, worshipped for what he's done. It's a bit like, I could have used them coming down on the side of condemnation of this man.
I mean, I think his actions throughout are condemning enough. Like, the dude suffocates his like, you don't... The film doesn't need a protagonist to say you were wrong, I was right, to know how a film feels about it. If anything, that kind of just reveals. I think you're pointing out probably one of the weaker parts of The Dark Knight by being like, and this is where the director sends his central idea.
Well,
we want the audience to believe.
I just generally believe if you're going to do a movie that focuses heavily on a villain, you also need a hero to like we tell stories of hero versus villain and all that, and like, yeah, we make movies about bad people, but and should art have to tell you that someone is bad? Can it not just say, here is a bad person or whatever? Like, probably not, but just, I don't know, there's just so much like baggage that comes with this character who is already so co-opted by pop culture to like be glamorized and everything, and we've got this whole obsession with serial killers thing that is ongoing in society at the moment. I'm not saying, you know, the director of a movie about Joker is honor bound to have to deal with all of that. It's just, it is very much a thing that this character is sort of hero worshipped by, let's be real, like incel fuckbags, like and I take your point again. I take your point about, like, you know, we can't just be afraid that like people are gonna take something like this and learn from it, but it is so, like, I want to say it's like an incel training manual in place. Like, there's so many small things, like, don't put your hands on a child, don't follow a person around, like, and it doesn't, I don't know.
The whole point was that he was a fucking loser and it was all in his head. Like, I remember when she actually like showed up at his door, I'm just like, this is just a ridiculous male fantasy moment. And then a male fantasy moment.
Yeah, and I could have done without them literally showing the scenes again with her not there. Like, I think it was clear enough. None of that was real.
But if anything, that's doing exactly what you want, though, and telling the audience like how to interpret it. Like I said, I don't think this is a particularly clever movie.
No.
I don't want to be like making it sound like that. But this is a guy who, one, extreme mental health problem. Two, I don't think they have sympathy so much for him as a human being. I think they have empathy for people in his position. I think they have empathy for the people in general in this film. But I think it's incredibly clumsily conveyed. I don't deny that. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of people who are completely being fucked over.
Absolutely.
Just like this guy is.
Yeah.
And we've seen in a society. We have seen
We live in a society.
We've seen in real life over and over and over again how men use violence to dominate other people to restore their own sense of humanity.
Yeah.
And if anything, we rarely see in a film portrayed to be such a gross, ugly thing that it is here. I think this is the most clumsy. I think the problem is, I just think Todd Phillips is kind of an idiot.
Yeah, I think he's a moody teenager who doesn't like the world. But
I think if anything, it's possible he doesn't understand some of the good things this film was actually doing. I mean, because this film is essentially a massive takedown of, one, hypermasculinity, and two, complete government abandonment of the people in favor of the rich. Because it was essentially a dude who has no concept of his own reality and fills his head with complete nonsense to restore his own sense of self. I mean, he literally says, I don't know who I am. I don't know that I exist. Like this beautiful, unbelievable fantasy woman stumbles briefly in his life, gives him the briefest moment of actual attention possible, and in his head, he actually turns it into this crazy, unreal fantasy. When the moment that he senses that his masculinity is being challenged by anyone, he uses violence to dominate other men to restore his sense of self. And all of it is portrayed to be that these are the actions of a fucking loser.
But I just fear it doesn't quite come down on that side enough. Like I said, for the movie to end the way it does, with him sort of raised up and then like getting his sort of triumphant celebration and like being the symbol of this clown movement, and then, you know, the whole scene in the asylum at the end that's like the more like, oh, this is joke, and, you know, is it this whole, like, we've seen The Killing Joke and like, oh, I prefer my backstory to be multiple choice, and like, was this all a dream or is it all a flashback or whatever. I feel, yes, you are being bombarded with what a loser this guy is for a good hour and a half, and then at the end it's like, now he is actualized as a murderer and a confident person who does this and that and the other, and I just, everyone feels differently. It makes me uncomfortable, the degree to which like this dude just is a walking red flag. But like, it's the small things. It's like, we all know, broad strokes, you shouldn't kill people, but it's the smaller things, like his interactions with Zazie Beetz. Like, you shouldn't latch onto someone based on a, like, 5-second interaction. You shouldn't put your hand on a child when, you know, when he, like, interacts with Bruce Wayne. And like, I don't know, there's just a few very, like, small social interactions he makes here that I don't think are 100% presented as wrong. Like, we know it's wrong that he, like, is in her apartment when her child is, you know, whatever. But just, I don't know, there's just so many little things like that, and just this, the narrative of, like, you know, be rejected by women, therefore become violent towards them, is a fucking gross one, and I could have done with a little bit more. It's hard to get away from.
But if anything,
I agree with you.
If anything, they did exactly what people have been asking for years, which is that they don't fetishize the violence he commits on, like, at all.
No,
like,
they don't frame it front as, like, when he murders, like, the guy that gave him the gun.
We know what he just did to Zazie Beetz and his daughter. But they don't force us to see it. They don't force people to relive the male on female, I mean, quote unquote domestic violence.
Yeah. But I feel it is.
Metaphorically, essentially, is domestic violence.
But I feel once he clowns up near the end, it is saying, look how cool this guy is. When he's dancing around to a song by a fucking paedophile, by the way, that they fucking paid the estate of Gary Glitter or whoever's collecting his licensing.
Is this a British thing?
That song that plays when he's dancing. That's like
music is low. I know nothing about music.
Okay, well, just that song that plays. That is a very famous song. It was used everywhere for years, and then it came out the guy that did that is a paedophile. I believe he's currently in prison, and like most people stopped using the song after that. But I don't know, just you know, when he puts on the full outfit and he's like dancing around, and then he goes on the show and everything. And I'll say, I think the bit with Robert De Niro at the end, like when he goes on the show, which to me is undoubtedly a reference to Dark Knight Returns. We covered that when, you know, he goes on the show and he murders the talk show host or whatever. And I think it was Conan.
Oh right, I forgot about that.
I think it was Conan O'Brien in that. I can't remember. The tension when he's like reaching into the back pocket, and you know, we've seen him rehearse it, and it's a really good scene when he's rehearsing his appearance on the show ahead of time in his apartment and stuff. And you've seen that he does the knock knock and then pretends to kill himself. And like when he like reaches into his pocket, you're like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? And then he says knock knock. I thought all of that was really good and tense, and it was like I was waiting for it to happen. But then I think when he delivers his little monologue, it's just really hammy. And like Robert De Niro's lines back, it's just so, I don't know, people wouldn't behave this way.
When I watched that, I was like, I'm definitely going to need to see this part again. Like, that was my reaction. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the movie fell apart in like the final 2 minutes here.
Yeah, just the dialogue just goes off a cliff after, like I said, like it's really tense, and then it just starts being like, as we would say, GCSE drama for you, I guess high school drama class, like a little two-man play. It's like, oh, like you could have.
Well, I think also, especially, and I think one of our conflicts with this film is whether or not certain things should have been hit over the head or not. And then here, it feels like a big departure where so many things are just literally stated. Themes are stated, which is not supposed to happen with a theme. And it made me question, and like, I think it's one, like, are these the themes you actually want to be kind of declaring at the end? Yeah. Like, it kind of just seems like a real, like, cop-out on some of the things you were doing throughout. And I think, again, that's part of the weakness is that, you know, it's at the end of the day, DC should have been like, Todd Phillips, this is an amazing idea. We'll give you 10% and someone much better will make the movie. Because I think so much of this is exactly what I have been craving for. I just don't, it's just completely and utterly different from the world of what can we do with comic books and film.
Yeah, and I've also called for that, like, let's do genre movies that just happen to use these characters.
We've called for that. Like, like, it's been a cause of ours for a long time. And in some ways, like, I think Logan in some ways copped out on that at some parts. Like, it's the big, you know,
he has to fight himself. Yeah,
it's a big, obviously, like, CGI'd up clone. Like, I remember like that being just like such a letdown moment in this beautiful movie about an old dude having to take a tiny girl to Canada.
Yeah.
Like,
you
that
could
was
have gotten where you needed to go without doing it that way. Yeah,
and I feel like this movie took it the next step further, which was that there was no CGI clone that the Joker had to face. But it did have some cop-out moments at the end. Like, how great would it have been if, like, we see Thomas Wayne walk down the alley, a Joker kind of smiles, and then they just cut away. Like, we know what happened. We don't need to see the fucking pearls again. again. Like, we just don't need to see it.
When he's... Because he, like, gets fired from his job as a clown, as he rightfully should have. And then he's, like, working as, like...
I love how you say that as, like, is Mike back to challenge me on this? Like, no, I don't think the scary, mentally deranged man with a gun should keep his job as a clown.
Yes. And he's, like, working as, like, a theatre usher. Like, when he, like, sees the Waynes in a theatre, I was like, oh, well, here we go. But then, you instead...
Oh, yeah, I thought that's what it was about to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I thought, I'll give them that as well. Like, the stuff...
I thought that scene was great.
Yeah, the stuff they did with bringing the Waynes into it in a way that was not at all what we've come to expect.
Yeah, like this is what Thomas Wayne would be like in real life 999 times out of 1,000.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there isn't that 1,000th version of Thomas Wayne that's a pretty decent human being, but like Thomas Wayne in all likelihood would be Howard Schultz and would literally be on the TV explaining that he is smart because of his money and he wants to give other people a chance to if they deserve it. It's so on the point. It's like, it's almost funny how desperate it is to be relevant. Yeah. Because that is actually how people in his position are behaving right now in the real world. So
you want to fix the world? Nah, I'm good. Let's privatize space travel.
That was such a breath of fresh air. The cops are not dying to save the people. They are kind of just incompetent rubes at best, who end up shooting other people because they have guns and they probably don't need guns.
Yes.
Also, anybody who's lived in New York City for longer than a month has met those three douchebags on a train and thought, man, those three douchebags look exactly like that, and they pretty much act exactly like that.
They're not just in New York, my friend. We've all met those people.
I've been on that moment in the train and thought, those guys are fucking douchebags.
Yeah, that's all trains in every major city.
That's all trains? Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad to know it's not just a New York City train.
Yeah, people on trains, men on trains particularly, make me quite irrationally angry all the time.
They've got their dress shoes on, their ties are off for some reason, even though they clearly just came from work, and they're just acting like giant douchebags.
Yeah, Scott Conn would play one of them.
There's a whole Scott Conn movie about that guy. That could happen. I think, if anything, I'm like almost mildly disappointed with the movie in the sense that, like, I wish it had just been done by someone smarter so that we could kind of skip over this whole like argument. Like, and I'm not saying you and me, but I'm saying like
this is the entire discourse.
I can't be on the internet and not hear about this movie. Can't hear about it from a bunch of people who didn't see it.
I was gonna say
no one shut up a movie theater because of this.
Yet.
I mean... And yet we had to listen for 2 weeks for fear that people were going to shoot a movie theater about this movie.
I will say that, like, after I'd finished watching it, I was kind of like, I probably could have done this podcast and just pretended I saw it, because not a lot happened. There were, like, a couple of things, like the Wayne stuff, that did kind of surprise me, but for the most part, it's exactly what people say. It's like, yeah, Phoenix is good, and the laughter is, like, there's a physicality that he is pulling off, not just with the laughter, but, like, his movements and all that. It's like, yeah, it's everything I've heard going into it, and I agree with quite a lot of the criticisms, and it makes me feel uncomfortable, and maybe I don't know, like, yeah, I think you can just, I objectively and intellectually think, yes, you can just make a movie where you're presenting a bad person on a plate and you're not saying anything, and the audience should be mature enough to say, that's a bad person, not someone I should dress like and go murder people. But it just, the whole thing made me personally feel uncomfortable, and not in a isn't this edgy provocative art way. And like, it's very I can't say it's a bad movie, it's just the whole thing is icky to me.
I mean, like, if no one dresses up like a clown and murders a bunch of women in the next 10 years, are you going to still feel icky about it? Like,
yeah,
I mean,
because
I guess
it's not just that. It's the kind of the gateway behaviors present that are like that. Like, and I've seen already people on fucking Twitter being like, oh yeah, this is a masterpiece and I've never thought about a film so much, and like, I identify so hard with this character, and it's like, guys, just fucking stop, please. And like, I think I shared it with you before it came out, like some dude saying like, oh yeah, I was with this girl and she wanted someone else, and now it was like the female known as whatever, and it was just all the language of just this incel crowd, and I was like, this is exactly what I was like afraid this movie would be. And speaking of what afraid the movie might be, before it came out, I think you and I were in agreement that like, we don't want to see a humanized Joker origin story, because it kind of cuts the legs out from under it. And I'll say this about it. I didn't feel that way after watching it. It wasn't like this whole thing as a concept was a mistake. I think
pleasantly surprised, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like, I don't want to go too far with it where it's like, here's the entire chronicle of the person called the Joker or anything.
Right.
Like, I think they did. I'm surprised they got 2 hours of that out of it without ruining the character.
Were you ever bored at any point? I was not.
Not really, no. I would say I had to be in a mood for it.
Sure. Like, I wouldn't be like, man, I really want to enjoy this Saturday afternoon with the Joker.
Yeah, but it's engaging and it's very pretty. Like if you go look at The Hangover for as The Hangover is, Todd Phillips he makes not ugly looking movies, and like it's going for style, and I think it is pulling that off.
There's a lot more criticisms we can get into in the movie. I think overall, though, I'm hopeful that people in power are watching this and are like, oh, we can make a $55 million not CGI monstrosity sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like, I think the sad part in some ways, though, is that, one, this movie would be getting essentially no negative attention if it was $5 million and the character was not the Joker. If he just puts on,
if this is just Joaquin Phoenix's every 2 years.
He just puts on a bird mask at the end. Or I don't know, something stupid like that. Like, nothing Gotham, it's not Thomas Wayne, it's literally just Howard Schultz, and he just puts on a bird mask at the end. Like, I think people are just like, this was an entertaining Joaquin Phoenix movie.
Yeah, he makes this movie every 2 years. He's violent and sad in a low-budget indie movie, and some of them are good and some of them are okay. I don't hate it by any means. I'm not like, let's put this into a box and bury it and never get it back out.
Compared to our feelings when this was announced, I'm almost over the moon with the sense of how much better it was based on what I assumed it was going to be based on when it was announced.
Yeah, totally. It's difficult in a more interesting way to talk about than a lot of the movies we've covered, because it's like
it wasn't saying things and it doesn't know what it's saying.
No, I know, but like
no. I'm agreeing with you. Like, that's why it's difficult. Is that things are happening here, and really dumb people made it. So
big credit for Todd Phillips for pointing a camera at Joaquin Phoenix.
Good job convincing Joaquin Phoenix to be in your. I mean, because at the end of the day, how many actors probably could have made this worthwhile? Probably not too many. When I say I wasn't bored,
I could have done with more from some of the supporting characters. Like, I think Brian Tyree Henry and Zazie Beetz both could have had a lot more to do. They are both very interesting actors, and I guess it's what you sign up for when you cast Joaquin Phoenix. It's like, right, this is all going to revolve around him. And he's good at what he does, but I don't know. Like, I don't completely hate it, but I don't think I fully like it either. So, and the larger debate about like art and people's responses to it, like, that is an interesting debate to have. And like, you're right. Like, if nothing bad does come of this, am I just worrying about nothing? And it's not even my place to worry about if people are idiots and choose to find inspiration in places where the person did or didn't intend you to find it in. Like, it is each person's individual responsibility to be able to identify what is like good and bad and whatever. But
I walked out of the theater and heard someone excitedly explain to another person, "This is an amazing prequel to The Dark Knight," and I'm just like, it's not my responsibility to worry about what other people are going to think about this movie.
Yeah, you're right, and it's like, definitely something that like I've had to like step away. At one point in my life, I did very much feel a need to like tell everyone why they're wrong and like be like, but actually this. But it's like, really just let people be. But like, I mean,
like, at the end of the day, like, in terms of things that this movie is like explicitly telling the viewers, it's that the rich are stupid. They should be killed. Depriving the world of social services has a huge negative impact on people.
But I think it should have done more of that, though. Like, I think it's
not actually providing jobs and a right to work for its citizens is going to lead to trouble. I mean, these are not like galaxy brain takes. These are basic history lessons that societies have been forced to learn or over and over and over again. Like this,
and are refusing to learn right now.
And they're also pretty decent things to be hitting the head, hitting a hammer or hammer head.
But like,
tired.
I don't know. I feel I could have used a little bit less, not to criticize Phoenix or the Arthur character, but like could have done with a bit more of that and a bit less of the like give me an Oscar acting. And like, I feel Nolan did some of this better in his is certainly the first two. I think Batman Begins, like, we had quite a
I'm sorry, just to
discourse.
clarify, you said this. What do you mean by this? I just want to know.
Oh, sorry, the like, the rich, the poor, the isn't society fucked, this city is corrupt. You know, like, I think in Batman Begins, I think he tackled this topic as well, if not better, personally. Like, I don't think this movie leaned nearly hard enough into those
if we're
themes.
talking about, like, damaging narratives, though, in film, damaging, like, mythologies, like, is there a more damaging mythology than the two biggest heroes of the last 20 years are billionaires? And also, they're the ones who are going to save us. They're the ones who are going to save humanity. They're the ones who are going to fix systems. I mean, if anything, like, I mean, that's the frustrating thing with Dark Knight Rises. There actually is a course correction happening there, and then it's thrown out the window by making the cops the heroes of the city. Yeah. So I don't think I can get fully on board. I think, what I do think, though, is that I think one of my biggest criticisms of this movie is that we just hear about the garbage strike. You should be able to smell a garbage strike, like, from the film.
That's what I mean. Like,
it's $55 million. It's not like a Safdie brothers movie where they're, like, shooting it and barely letting people around them know that there's a movie happening.
Yeah,
like,
I think that stuff is too much tell, don't show.
Yes, that I do agree with. I think that would have been easy to show. It would have been interesting to show.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm on board.
I mean, the garbage strike is just the most obvious one because they kept telling us about it.
I'm on board.
And you wouldn't have to do that much to do it.
Yeah. I'm fully on board with, like, the narrative this film is theoretically delivering. I just don't think Phillips delivered on that part of it well enough,
for
personally.
Sure.
And it comes.
I think we're in agreement on that.
Okay.
Brett Cullen is in this movie and in The Dark Knight Rises.
Yes.
Yeah. I think he's actually better suited for the role than Alec Baldwin, who was initially in it.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think Baldwin might have been a little too hammy for this particular role, or in the tone with this movie.
Come on.
And Brett Cullen, I think, brings the right amount of, like, understated. I don't know. I really thought he was really good in the small role.
I thought he was. How did you come away from that? Like, what do you think the truth is there with Penny, Arthur's mother, and Thomas? Like, is he adopted? Is he the love child of Thomas Wayne? Like,
my takeaway from it was that it did not truly matter. I think
I'm just asking.
No. I just want to say, I mean, this is what my takeaway was that it didn't really matter because the point was more of the untreated mental health issues of the mother.
Yes.
So, and the kind of discarding that happened between Thomas and her, regardless of whether or not they actually had an affair. I got the sense that that he was not the child of.
I thought it was like a little bit of both sides almost. Like I almost thought, like, something happened, but he's probably not his son.
Yeah, I would buy that. I think there's plenty of evidence to support that.
I knew that they were going to do Thomas Wayne. I knew that there was a kid playing Bruce Wayne. The little clearly Alfred but not Alfred moment, I thought that was fun.
The Alfred from Gotham, who's just a raging dick, which I guess makes sense.
Oh, Sean.
I mean, I only watched like 8 episodes of Gotham, but that Alfred seemed like a big dick.
He is throughout. I finished Gotham because I hate myself, and he remains that way. I think there's definitely some stuff there that like they talk about how, like, they didn't take any particular inspiration from comics, and I also think we shouldn't be too married to comics, but I thought they did a good job of incorporating the comic stuff in a different way, and I think it is a proof of concept that you can take a comic book property and just, I don't want to say make a grown-up film, but, you know, make something that isn't just action figures smushing into each other.
I'll say it, make a grown-up, like, make a film that's, like, not like a long-running serialized without the small moments. I was thinking about the MCU today, and I was thinking about our conversation of Game of Thrones Season 8.
Okay.
And
tying it all together.
This is actually the podcast series finale. what I'm about to say is not entirely a criticism. In fact, it's not really a criticism. It's more of an explanation of how I view the MCU. One of the big things missing from the final 2 seasons of Game of Thrones was actually those small moments, like those in-between moments between the spectacle. And I think in large part because they were not particularly good at spectacle. A lot of their spectacle felt spectacle for the sake of spectacle.
Like how Marvel's action scenes aren't very good.
Right. I think Marvel in general is mostly like spectacle for the sake of spectacle, but I would say they probably are a little bit more patient with it and earn it more, and that's why it's working. But there are definitely times where I felt like, man, I feel like a lot happened with these characters or a lot should have happened with these characters in the last 2 years that would make this feel a lot more
earned.
Yeah. And again, I think Marvel just happens to do it well. Like, they happen to skip the small steps and do it well. That
they use good shorthand.
Yes. I would just like some movies based on these characters about those in between moments.
Absolutely.
And I would like it treated. I mean, like, it doesn't have to be deadly serious.
No,
but
it doesn't.
I don't think I need anything more deadly serious than this. Like this, like a handful of like laughs throughout. Let's make this the maximum. Let's make this as serious as it ever needs to really get.
Yeah.
But I want more movies like this where it doesn't have to feel like a big monstrosity every time.
The one I always beat the drum for, and it's probably not like the ideal one, but like show me a fucking relationship drama between Peter Parker and whoever you want the romance, the love interest to be, but just like, you know, dissect this relationship. Tell me what it means to, like, you know, the impact it has on them, and not just like the generic overtrodden ground of like he's put her in danger and now they can't be together. Like, show me the real world day-to-day shit and like, you know, do that, or like do a fucking comedy if you have to, or whatever it is, but like something where it's like the superhero is secondary to the story in the middle. And it's like they say that shit whenever they make one of these. It's like, but the real heart of this movie is this. It's like, no, the heart of this movie is a fucking CGI slugfest again. I think we are moving in different ways with all of these, and I think DC actually have a pretty good looking slate coming up. Like, I think Birds of Prey, personally.
If Aquaman is their low point creatively, artistically,
and I thought that was
that's
fine.
Not a terrible low point.
I thought it was fine.
But that's what I'm saying, though. It was fine.
Yeah,
it was fine. Like,
it
that's
didn't
my point,
offend
though, is that,
me.
like, if that's gonna be their low point for a while, they're good with me.
I appreciated that they were just trying to have fun with it. Aquaman, like, it got bad in places, but they were at least having fun, and I could feel that. And like, you know, Birds of Prey looks good. I think that Robert Pattinson Batman is probably going to be real good, but obviously we have nothing on that.
People need to check Pattinson's indie work out.
It's real fucking good. Lighthouse looks dope as shit.
Good Time is like a modern classic. I just rewatched it for the first time. Yeah. What an unreal performance. High Life this year was amazing.
Worth just changing your Twitter profile about, you know.
I have to kind of like spend time convincing people that Pattinson's good to like people who don't know. I'm like, you gotta like watch Good Time. You gotta watch Good Time. Like, you're really missing out on what Pattinson's
like half of his career at this point, pretty much, like, or more, like
more than half.
Yeah,
it's just weird, scuzzy indie movies for the last 8 years.
Yeah,
so
I don't think they could interest him with the kind of Batman movie we've seen before. I think he would want it to be like, I hope they do Long Halloween. Well, this wasn't anywhere near as violent and argue-y as I feared it would be.
No, I mean, I think we're mostly coming from the same place on this. I think the big thing we disagree on is, like, essentially, is this movie going to cause bad things to happen?
No,
or like, is this movie sending the wrong messages to people?
Yeah, maybe. It gives me a feeling of discomfort, and I don't know how much of that is like fear of how people will take it versus just a negative reaction to the character they're showing and feeling that they should have done more to make it clear that they don't condone the things the guy does. But like, yeah, maybe that's all just me being like, whatever. But
I think even so, like, that's the whole point. Like, that conflict within yourself is like, that's not something we've had to discuss before, like with a movie we talked about on here.
But then I also know in my bones that Todd Phillips isn't smart enough to deliberately have wanted me to feel that way. So
no. I really.
So that's why
I cannot emphasize this enough. Anything positive I say about this movie should pay no compliment to Todd Phillips. Yeah. I think it was just like right place, right time, and he didn't get in the way of it enough to fuck it up.
I think I would probably feel better about it if somehow it was just put in front of me and I knew nothing about who directed it or heard any of the bullshit he'd said before, during, and after. I don't think I would suddenly think, oh, this is an amazing film. It's still, I think, quite flawed, but I just can't get away from the fact I know who that man is, I know how he feels about things, and for him to present this, it's like, I don't know. And like, you know, that's, people will or will not feel that way. There's no arguing about that. Like, that's just how you feel. But yeah.
And one last quick thing.
Sure.
De Niro is fucking hysterical in this movie as essentially Jay Leno. I don't know, just like a really shitty late night host.
Yeah.
Like, I laughed at all of his bad jokes, his purposely bad jokes, so much, and the fact that they were actually getting laughter. Yeah. Like, from the audience. Like, that was, I mean, again, it's not really subtle, but I don't really think a movie called The Joker needs to be subtle.
And like, you know, you see some of the shit that De Niro has signed up for in the last few years, and like good roles for actors of his age, you know, are few and far between. It's like, you know, I'm not saying it's like an amazing performance from him, but it is kind of nice to see him do something that isn't just, you know, completely
I think
awful.
between this and The Irishman, it's going to be a good fall for De Niro, or a good autumn for De Niro.
Well, if I have 4 spare hours, I'll check that out, but, you know.
Instead, you have to watch Gotham.
Look, I could watch Gotham without watching Gotham, you know.
But overall, I'd say I'm pretty bullish on DC at the moment. If I were to describe this movie, it was pretty similar to Logan in the sense that it feels like, okay, what are the biggest comic book movies doing right now? Let's make sure we do none of that. It's kind of nice.
But then we'll do some of it.
Do some of it, but mostly none of it. Like, it's
Logan,
nice to not see...
not so much.
Oh, yeah, Logan, yeah. It's nice not to see a movie where protagonists kick someone through a helicopter and there's no blood. I think there should be consequences to violence. I think that's important.
And there are no fights, you know. There are just acts of violence and like.
And it was awful. Like, the violence was like, oh god, like I fucking hate those douchebags on the train as much as everybody. I can barely watch what happened to them. It was terrible.
Yeah. Well, there you go then. That's the Joker. And, you know, we mentioned some of the stuff with the DC movies and the role they're on, coming hopefully very soon to EnterTheRealWorld.com. Myself, Mike, Ben Phillips, and Jerome Cusan are going to do a little listicle. We're going to aggregate our rankings of the DC movies and present to you a wonderful article for you all to violently disagree with in the comments on 411 Mania rather than on EnterTheRealWorld.com. But hey, them's the breaks. Check everything out on the site. There will be movies, me and Ben's Big Boy podcast. I don't know where we'll be by the time this comes out, but we've recently done stuff like The Departed and Pan's Labyrinth and Sunshine, so listen to that, please. And Mike and I will, I promise, do Legion Season 3. It may be another month, but I promise we're going to do it, and there'll be lots to say there. And then who knows what we'll do after that, but we'll find something.
No, it's cute that Matt thinks I'm going to remember anything about Legion Season 3 in a month.